On this fateful play in Super Bowl 56, Odell Beckham Jr. supposedly tore an ACL in his left knee that wasn't even there to begin with. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and in this video, we're going to talk about this wild story here with Odell Beckham and the timeline of these ACL tears when the ACL supposedly wasn't even there. I sound terrible here. I'm recovering from losing my voice, but let's dive into these comments. At his introductory press conference for the Ravens, Odell had this to say, quote, "That whole season I was playing without it. It was a crazy thing. I signed with the LA Rams, and I remember Elatrash coming down, and he's like, I've just got to inform you, you don't have an ACL. You know we can redo your surgery right now." And this was week 9 of the season. Elatrash is Dr. Neil Elatrash. He's an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon, very well respected, one of the Rams team physicians. And so the timeline of all this is really fascinating because oftentimes, of course, you're doing a physical before you sign a new player. And that physical often involves getting some imaging, getting an MRI, for example, to look at the knee. So either in this scenario, the Rams got the MRI, knew that he had a torn ACL, but signed him anyways, or signed him and then got an MRI and found out that he didn't have a functioning ACL, which either way is pretty wild to either not check beforehand or to then sign somebody knowing they have that type of an injury as a wide receiver. Many people's first reaction is, well, how is it even possible that he was playing on a torn ACL or with no ACL? And that part's actually pretty believable. If we look at our biodigital anatomy tool here, I've hidden the femur, but deep inside the knee joint here highlighted in yellow is going to be the ACL. The ACL is a passive stabilizer of the knee. Passive meaning it's not actively firing. It's not a muscle that can contract and be controlled. The ACL is either there or it's not. But thankfully, our body has other dynamic stabilizers, active stabilizers of our joints. And for the ACL, those stabilizers are the hamstrings. The hamstring muscles sit here on the back side of the knee. And because of the orientation of where the hamstrings go and attach down on the tibia or the shin bone, when the hamstring muscles fire, they pull the tibia backwards relative to the femur, which is basically what the ACL is trying to do. It's trying to prevent the tibia from moving forward. So the hamstrings are there to actively provide stability to the knee joint in a way that the ACL is also trying to help out. In fact, the key tenet of ACL injury rehab is good control and strengthening of the hamstrings, because the hamstrings are vital to help protect the ACL and help protect the knee. So it's very believable that somebody was able to play at a high level and not know they had a torn ACL. It's the exception, not the norm, but it's certainly not something that they're lying about. It's very possible that Odell at some point between his first ACL surgery and when the Rams did that next MRI, either the graft didn't heal right, something got injured again, and he had a non-functioning ACL in his knee. But he dynamically had been able to rehab well enough that he wasn't experiencing enough instability to make him or the medical team think that his ACL was incompetent. So that part of this whole story, while it was kind of misrepresented a little bit, is not crazy to believe it being possible that Odell was able to play with a torn ACL. Surprising, yes, but not completely untrue. So then if we fast forward to this play in Super Bowl 56, what happened here with Odell was not a new tear of his ACL. What we saw here was an instability episode. Basically, we see the exact same movement of the knee. We see that same position where the knee goes inward. We see that tibia shift forward, but it's the instability because the ACL was already torn. And he just so happened to have his knee in a position where that instability event occurred to make us think the ACL had been torn. And then, of course, what we heard with the communication afterwards about the injury. So this wasn't that he retore a non-existent ACL. It's that he finally had an instability episode on the field where the tibia shifted forward because the ACL was incompetent and the hamstrings weren't able to control the position of the knee. So again, very possible, just very poorly communicated. After the Super Bowl then, of course, the Rams don't want people to think that they knowingly were playing Odell all the second half of the season when they knew his ACL was torn, because it's just bad optics, even if it might have truly been safe because of how well he was functioning. It's not like they did something dangerous. It's just fans would understandably be very critical if they knew they had signed a player with a torn ACL. But again, it comes down to his function. And so if his function was good, then of course it's safe. Let him go play. The most interesting part of this to me is just the timeline. That idea of whether or not the Rams got the MRI and knew the ACL was torn and then still signed him anyways, or got the MRI after they had signed him and then found out about the tear. That's a pretty bold strategy to sign a player, even if they're functionally doing well, if you know they have an incompetent ACL, because at any time this instability episode could happen and then they're of course out for a year. These kind of stories just annoy me because now of course fans become even more wary of what these teams' medical personnel say about, well, what are they hiding, what's really going on, because this was a perfect example of somebody playing with a torn ACL, even though functionally they were doing well. I think it introduces a lot of room for distrust and just poor communication all around. But again, a totally possible scenario, just represented a little bit in a confusing way with some terminology that I think could have been a little bit more clear. But that's it for the video, everybody. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below. Hope this was educational, and until next time, we'll see you later.